What's up, guys? I'm SaltEMike, and this is your Star Citizen Week in Review for March 1st, 2021. If this is your first week in review, it's basically where I take all of the official Star Citizen news, pile it into one video, and throw my opinions in there as well. Also, if you haven't checked out my live stream yet, I do stream on Twitch every day but Monday at twitch.tv/SaltEMike, so feel free to stop by and say hello. Also, just one more bit of housekeeping before we jump into the actual video. Today's video is sponsored by Star Trek Fleet Command. I've been doing a lot of this on my live stream, and it's been quite fun. It is a free-to-play mobile game, and it's an MMO in the Star Trek universe, and a lot of people from my community are playing it, even some Star Citizen devs. So if you want to support the channel, there is a QR code on the screen right now. All you have to do is scan that code with your mobile phone, either iOS or Android, and give it a try. If you guys want to play with us, we are on US 056 TARG, T-A-R-G. That's the server we're on, and you can join our alliance, Trixie 17. All right, so you guys can find that and hang out with us and have a good time, as well as support the channel. So I appreciate that, guys. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. We usually start out with patch notes, but there were none this week, so we're going to jump right into roadmap updates because we had a roadmap roundup this week. Starting out with the progress tracker, sliding. Sliding is a thing that I think is going to be important for the game, sliding behind cover, things like that. But if we look at the current animations, I feel like this is quite a ways off, and the roadmap and its movement on the roadmap is showing that as well. So moving into actor status tier 2, this was added to the progress tracker on the roadmap, which adds a lot of new elements like hygiene. Something that was mentioned years ago, to be honest, like NPCs not wanting to talk to you if you haven't showered yet. But now with a lot of the actor status stuff with eating and drinking, this can go pretty wild ways of like scum and using the bathroom, things like that. So it's interesting. They also had NPC status tracking, not sure what that is. Multiple bites. We eat food really quickly in one shot, so I assume this is just going to make it feel more natural. And then we have DNA integrity, medical insurance, cybernetic limbs, and cloning. These four are clearly planned to come with hospital gameplay that we heard on Calling All Devs recently about Death of a Spaceman. Medical insurance sticks out the most to me, actually, because I'm just curious how it'll play out. Is it going to be like ships are currently, where you just pay a penalty for having to go there, or can you pay for better treatment and extend our lives? And the next thing added is just small home outposts. This is just the modular team's work on these outposts. As you know, we'll see more on this in the video section of our video today, but again, it's pretty basic, nothing crazy there, and they've been touching on it quite a bit lately. For release view, which is the cards and everything, that's the view I look at the most. There are items moving from 313 out into 314. That is missile operator mode and missile guidance and control rework. These were a lot of the answers for the Q&A that we had last week or a couple weeks ago. And as you can see on screen, they're still pretty far along, but they just didn't make it past the go, no-go meeting. And the idea is that they should be really polished come 314. They also had surrender move from 313 to 314, but this is a bit of a meme feature as it's been moving down the line for probably a year now at this point. So who knows? I don't really pay much attention to that one anymore. For 313, we have quite a few committed items. Committed items have passed their go, no-go meeting. One is object push and pull, which you're going to see a lot of in the video section of this video, as well as mounted guns. For forced reactions, we'll see that as well. And new asteroids. This one sticks out to me a little bit, but the only reason it does is because they were labeled the Stanton system asteroids. Does that mean that there will be more unique asteroids for different systems, like Pyro that's coming in the future? Maybe. We'll have to see. Cave entrances. This one was actually a surprise for me because seeing it in such an early state on ISC last week, I thought this was going to fall off, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I can't remember. But maybe it was going to fall off and that it was not going to make it into 313. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what visual updates and gameplay updates they are going to show us leading up to the 313 release. Refinery station, commercial overlays, kind of whatever. Vehicle visual degradation, also we saw on ISC, and it's nice to see that making it in. Vehicle names and serial numbers. There's a lot of drama on this. We're probably going to touch on this later in the video here, but if you haven't yet, check out my answer to the call this week where we touched on it in great depth. There's also new cards coming to 3.13. Mining subcomponents. I can't tell if these are coming because they didn't like the way consumables were being used and they want to remove them, or they love them and they want to build off of it. It's sort of hard to tell. They're doing so much stuff with mining and nothing else, which is kind of confusing. Next is Shield Effects V2, which I think is just adding SDS shields to all of the other ships in the game. And then UI Reputation, we've seen this recently on an ISC, and it's greatly needed. I think this is going to make playing Star Citizen more gamified, easier to make decisions on what to do, and maybe motivate a little bit of a grind. We'll have to see. Moving on to video updates, we had an ISC this week on the actor feature team and what they're working on. And the first item they're working on has been talked about for a while now, and it's mounted weapons. These are size 1 ship weapons that are attached to a mount out in the world. And the thing I wanted to point out first is the modes that they're offering us.
So there are 2 modes with mounted gun. There's what you'd consider the ready state, where you're just holding the grip as if you had a weapon in a stocked mode. We didn't want to give the impression or the feel of the gun being bolted to the front of the camera, so there's a definite sense of weight and a slight delay in the direction that your gun points to with your character catching up. In addition to that, though, we have ADS mode, which you'll be familiar with just FPS shooters in general and Star Citizen with FPS weapons. That gives more finer control, and obviously you're zoomed in, you're looking down the barrel of the weapon.
I like the 2 ways to fire. They look really polished, basically, something I'm starting to get used to with these guys, which is kind of weird, right? The next thing I would ask is there going to be any variation with these gun types initially? Because they're just showing the Gatling gun, which is consistently been used by them in initial releases.
So the first iteration, we're bringing you a Gatling gun. That's going to be the only weapon available. It's just going to be in sort of ad hoc locations for you guys to give it a try and see what you think and give us feedback. Not just going to be Gatling guns. The intention is to provide a wide range of weapons. So you're aware of how many weapons we have on our ships. Imagine that on a mounted gun.
I think the small initial release to get some feedback makes a lot of sense, and then all the gun possibilities can come in. The other note is that he casually mentioned these will be in locations, which means we don't get to determine those locations. So they're fixed out in the world, which is a slight bummer, but I assume we'll probably get that ability to add them later. Like, I don't know, first thing that comes to mind is hanging out of a caterpillar with one of these things, right? The next feature they're adding onto, actually, is force reactions. So we saw them with knockdowns, and now they're adding staggers in as well.
Another feature we're working on, and in fact we've been working on this feature for a little while now, is force reactions. And in this iteration, we're introducing staggers. Stagger really introduces just an extra layer into the combat experience. It's not something that's as disruptive as being knocked down, but it is something noticeable and visceral when you're shot, say, from a 50 cal pistol or a bearing shotgun. You're going to notice it and feel it.
This is cool, but if it's anything like my experience with knockdowns, what you see in the video from CIG is far from the experience in the PU and Star Marine. So I'll take all this with a grain of salt when it comes to force reactions and animations and things like that. Next is something I've been waiting for forever. It's stupid, but yeah.
And I can excitingly announce that our first vehicle will be a cargo trolley. As a feature, it's been really interesting because we've taken the approach of making it physically accurate. You have little coaster wheels that spin and rotate based on how you're pushing it. If you've ever pushed a trolley cart around a supermarket, you'll know how that goes. But it also expands our toolbox for the level designers. Imagine any FPS or third-person game without some sort of push block you can push around and climb on top of. Not for 3.13, but moving forward, the intent is to make use of them in various delivery missions and whatnot. And then beyond that, we'll see NPCs and players using them to sort of push cargo around. At a later date, that's going to be a key component in terms of your day-to-day life as moving things around with your ship.
I love doing delivery missions. I think they're some of the more fun things to do until they've kind of been ruined recently in the game. But these should really help with those, and I think this is going to make a great tool to enjoy them more again in the future. What I'm confused about is how in 1,000 years we're still using caster wheels on push-pull carts. We've seen concept art for Grav-Lev versions of this. I tried to find it for the video but wasn't able to, but this seems this just seems weird. I don't know. It just seems so basic, but in the end, basic functionality is useful, and hopefully it's useful in game. Then we had a sprint report. It was an entirely environmental sprint report. So they started out with ship to station docking. It's in final art, which means they're adding the little details and signs and such like that. The next thing, the planet content team added Degnus root, or some algae used in medical products. And I think this is foreshadowing. Please have it be foreshadowing. It's used in the creation of medical supplies. With items found in the world. Crafting? I need this. There was also more polish to planets and moons. Lyria's materials and asset packs were updated, as well as adding coral and starfish to Hurston's beaches. Starfish will look more sci-fi, as well, they said, when they do another pass on it. Obligatory homestead update. We get it every time. And yeah, of course, this took up most of the segment because it's big, and two, it's a big seller for the game. So my imagination roars every time I see these updates, but I try to keep myself calm because, again, these are just for NPCs at the start, and the end is not near. So I try to stay calm with this one. Also, there was a white box of the new Babbage Hospital. This medical gameplay is coming in pretty hot. They also had Horizons Hospital, which is being shown as well, but the main point that they made in this one is that it will not be with the initial release. And then Turbulence first showcase. So we finally saw work from Turbulence new team that is going to be working on environments. And I saw a lot of comments when I was watching this live on my live stream where people were like, oh my god, they're going over the Javelin wreck. We already have that. But the whole point of it was to make this a test site for new developers to learn the engine. And my cat made a little appearance there, if you can hear her, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, this was just as a test to allow them to understand their workflow and how things work, and for them to expand on environments in the future. And they're going to expand on these wrecks in the future because the work that they did, the team really liked. Moving on to the next video was Calling All Devs, and it's with Richard Tyre on the road to inventories. And that's very important. It's the road to inventories, not necessarily how they work. So from what we have now, what is next? What's coming next with inventories?
Right now, what we have in game, I think that's probably the best starting point. So right now, what we have is we have personal inventory, but it's a limited personal inventory. It's an inventory that you can open up your backpack, you can see the items in there, but those items are limited to a very subset of items such as commodities, so FPS minables, and the food and drink item. But as soon as you get to something like a pistol or an ammo magazine or a flare, then you can't put that in your backpack. So that's a current limitation, and that's a limitation based on our current infrastructure of technology that covers the saving of the persistent items to the back end. So in terms of what we're aiming towards next is we're aiming towards upgrading that system and making it more flexible so that, I have found a combat knife, I have found a pistol, I want to take my helmet off and put it in my backpack. So you should be able to do that. The other inventory that we're talking about, we have, so that's what you classify as like personal inventory.
Okay, so in case you weren't aware and really wanted to watch the progress on this feature, what he just explained is what's slated for 3.14. And it's currently on the roadmap as tentative. Like simply upgrading the back end and allowing for more items to be stored. That is what's coming next. The next subject is the only feature mentioned on the show that is also on the roadmap, and this is slated for Q4 this year.
So that's what we classify as external inventory. Now, the next leap in terms of the next level of inventory is what we're classifying as the true physical inventory. So that is where you'd have a locker or a weapon rack, and you'd actually see the physical item stored on that particular compartment. So if it was a locker, you'd open the locker and you'd actually see, your undersuit or your clothes or your armor. And if it's a weapon, right, you'd see the weapon, and you're physically dealing with those items in the world.
We've actually seen this functioning. I think the real issue is getting all of the possible items to work within that system. Think of all the armors and clothing and weapons and all these things that would have to go into a locker, and reorganizing or reworking those to get them to fit in the system and look good is probably what's going to take so long. After that, they start to go further down the line, but the main point of the show seemed to touch on this specifically and why it was prioritized.
So the next step is what we call local inventory. What is local inventory? Local inventory is going to be a local inventory for the area that you're in, but it's not physically represented. Now, that doesn't mean it's infinite. It's still limited in terms of what you can put in it, but it'll be localized to, say, a landing zone, or localized to a ship. So a large ship would be able to fit more things in than a small ship, and a landing zone would be able to fit in probably the most amount of things, because that's equivalent to like your hangar where you're storing all of your gear.
The idea of local inventory is really great. I love this interim plan because of, if we waited for true physical inventories, we wouldn't see anything that represents the Star Citizen I backed for and hope to play for a really long time. But also, this episode was a little bit frustrating for me. I loved it on the one hand, but I felt it was lacking with how the changes and the elements that they talked about in the show would affect the actual game and how we would play it a little bit more. But this clip really explains why they went the route of explaining the next steps and what it would lead to as like the end product of physicalized inventories, rather than the basics of it and how it'll work.
I like to give people the understanding of our intentions of what we're trying to achieve, because it's easy for me to just go, yeah, this is what you're going to get. Local inventory, it works like this. You open it up in the local area, it's limited to that, job done. But it's about, I think our community deserve more. They deserve, well, why are we doing this? What is our intentions? We've been told physical inventory. Why are you putting this random local inventory in? And it's about explaining the reasoning, the understandings, where we're trying to achieve, to validate that gameplay, and then, to bring all the other teams along with us. So
I think this makes a lot of sense, but the big thing that going down this route hurts is the inability to ask follow-up questions, which Jared rarely does, to be honest. And does any of this work for looting players? When are we going to be able to loot players? Can we loot local inventories on ships if we board them? How? If this opens a million questions, like as an actual player, not someone interested in game development. And at times, I do feel exhausted from the game development classes that are Star Citizen videos, instead of this is how the game's going to work, this is how you're going to enjoy it, start imagining how you're going to play the game from there. For other updates, pretty short section today. We'll start out with the naming drama. I touched on this a lot in Answer the Call this week, so feel free to check that out, which is my podcast. And, it's a subject that we asked other members of the Star Citizen community what they think, because it's not just what I think. Because personally, what I think is, I'm a little bit indifferent on the subject. I don't care what the name of my ship is. I care about the interactions with the game and how I will enjoy it. So for me, this is a subject that doesn't bother me so much, but it did others. So feel free to check that video out and hear kind of the points of view of other people than just me. So for Galactapedia updates, this was a big one. We usually get like 5 or so updates. This one was long. So check out Tradeways. I wasn't expecting trading to work this way with the Banu and Jian, so feel free to check that out. There's always some nice, interesting tidbits in the Galactapedia and its updates. We also had a launcher update this week, which is nothing special or to write home about or to talk about. And lastly, the sneak peek. The sneak peek, they are really pushing this bar at Horizon. I don't know why, because it likely won't work any better than the bars that we have currently, and it likely won't add any new gameplay elements in Star Citizen for us to experience. Oh, never mind. I forgot. The screenshots. It's all about the screenshots. So with that, guys, we're going to end this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, click the link down below if you haven't yet to try out Star Trek Fleet Command. It's a game I've really been enjoying. Leave a like, comment on anything that we discussed here today, and share this video with anybody who you think is interested in Star Citizen. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching.